a moment of silence for joys and concerns said and unsaid. So be it. Jennifer Heglar is a former educator and counselor in training who believes in connection to humans, animals, and the world around her. She has been facilitating rituals, classes, and other events for the local earth-based spiritual community since 2013. Please welcome Jen.
Thank you all for having me back. I got to speak here, it feels like 100,000 years ago, but it was maybe 2018, 2019. There are some here who might also know me. I was formerly known as Miss Heglar. I used to teach in Washington County schools before I decided, nothing says midlife crisis like a change of career. So, I guess on that note, we'll get going. I do want to warn you or give you a heads up. There will be some audience participation in this. So you don't have to participate, but it is encouraged. As I was working on notes for this, I looked around the room to gather my thoughts. At that moment, I had noticed I had a white amaryllis next to my desk. And I don't know how familiar you are, but usually it's multiple bulbs in one pot, right? One of the bulbs was in full bloom. Now, it would have been easy and probably wise to file that away for later. After all, I had a 20-minute or less talk that I should have been planning for, but I stopped momentarily and I shifted my focus. Not just for procrastination reasons, thank you, but this dainty bloom on this discarded bulb, it only ended up in my care because a student or parent was not aware of my mother's prolific brown thumb. So, rather than be discarded, she gave it to me. And now this bulb is flourishing in my care. This thing, so fragile and dainty, that I had to gently lift my face to the center of the bloom to catch that delicate fragrance. It's one of those moments where you realize that there's magic hidden in plain sight. Now, if the word magic gives you pause, that's okay. Feel free to substitute something else. Gratitude, strength, wisdom, beauty, connection. And if those words are still a little too woo-woo, you can look to the field of positive psychology to find an empirical, peer-reviewed way of looking at the world and seeing the bright spots. Positive psychology focuses on strengths and abilities. And when I said strengths and abilities, you may have pictured someone, right? Perhaps someone who always makes you feel seen, truly witnessed. Or maybe someone who offers a balanced perspective when you need one, or strives to meet people where they are. We each have our own gifts, attributes that, while unique to each of us, can be combined with those of others around us to create something greater, an unstoppable force for change, and hopefully we try to use our powers for good. So I struggled when I heard 20 minutes because I got caught up in trying to intellectualize things. How do you quantify whimsy and joy? That's one of those times when, for me, the witch and the scientist are in conflict. The way I view the world is the spirit of this particular place. And it means falling in love with rainbows and creeks and spider webs. But it also means that sometimes it can be difficult to explain why I love those things to people who are coming at things differently. Things. Can you tell I'm running off my notes at this point and don't have things typed up? But how do you fall in love with life in a measurable way? To me, that's where we find the magic in the mundane. Sure, you listened to me pontificate about a flower, but how many of you had a moment this morning where you looked around and something caught your attention? Maybe it was the steam from your coffee cup. Maybe it was the sun trickling in through the window. But I hope, if it hasn't happened yet today, you have a moment when you leave here that gives you pause. It's so easy to appreciate the beauty and magic in rainbows and sunsets and flowers in bloom, in children's laughter and birth announcements, those moments when we really feel connected. But when's the last time that you felt moved by someone's laugh lines or by a dry creek bed? When's the last time that you realized even spreadsheets can be sacred? It's okay to laugh. I love a spreadsheet. I also realize that these are things in the modern world we tend to take for granted. Also, I really like color coding things. But the more we're willing to stop and look around and realize that these touch points are what connect us. That empty spider web is where we had an orb weaver who helped keep mosquitoes away and keep our family safe. That weed out the window that's getting kicked around by the wind, there's something really lovely in watching that cyclical pattern of whipping around. Even holding space for someone when they cry is sacred. One of my hobbies, pleasures, joys, is I facilitate a death cafe in Johnson City. Now, you might think dead stuff and food. Okay. If you're an omnivore, the two go together more than you think. But the chance to hold space for people who otherwise don't have that safety, to get to be there for people when they cry, and to sit with them when they are at their lowest. Is that not magic? What is that other than God made manifest? If you've ever helped get a squirrel that's fallen down or gotten a bird out of a net, even finding a bee and picking it up so it doesn't get stepped on, those things are all sacred. That's magic because our actions ripple out. Even something as small as putting a worm back in the grass can have such huge implications. Now, most people, when they think of magic, they think of candles and maybe robes and doom and gloom. If you're a horror movie fan, I don't even want to know where your head goes, okay? But I'm using magic in its expansive form. Magic is using your will and your actions to change the world around you. And sometimes all it takes is a moment of wonder. By opening ourselves to the magic and connection and strength around us, it makes us more open and connected to the world. As sad as I can get, and that can be pretty sad. I know I'm not the only person who has struggled with mental illness or depression. I cling to the bright spots. Going for weeks and knowing that you're never gonna get better. But there's something about seeing that one sunrise that cuts through the haze. Or having a friend stop and ask, hey, how are you really? Having those intentional pockets for deep connection and wonder, that's what helps us build a better world. I'm thankful for the opportunity to give this talk, even though it might feel like it's a little circuitous, because for me it was an exercise in gratitude. The reason why I wanted to talk about the magic in the mundane is because I don't know if you all have noticed, there are constantly 100,000 demands on our time, and it's so hard to care about everything that needs our attention and care. I want to make myself abundantly clear. Finding the sacredness and beauty in everyday life doesn't fix the world's problems. We still need to work together to fight climate change. There's still wars throughout the world. But I see this as a touch point and a way to remain connected and hopeful. Because the more open you are to even finding beauty in a Google Doc, the more likely you are to be recharged and hopeful to fight the good fights, whatever that may look like. For me, one of my big fights is meeting with people independently or in small groups and just seeing them. Think about how many times, how many people you encounter in the course of your life that you're just ships passing. Have you ever shared a moment with a stranger? One of those where you really see each other. To me, that is one of the most magical gifts we can give each other, is to reach out and really be present with someone else. So I hope I didn't hurt your feelings that the talk ran a little short, but we're coming up to the audience participation part. I noticed that while I've been talking, you all have kind of been looking around the room, and it's been beautiful to see that some of you all, your eyes have locked on something and your expressions changed or softened. So I want to give everyone that opportunity. We're going to take 2 or 3 minutes. It will feel like forever. I just want you to know that, okay? And I want us to just be. And I want you to push through that awkwardness. And I don't care if you look at your phone or if you pick off your nail polish, this is your time. But I want you to pay attention to what you notice and what shifts when you are open to connecting with this moment. If anyone feels called to share, you are welcome to share anything that you notice that you otherwise wouldn't, or any shifts that you felt? Because I know at first it feels awkward, and that's okay. The goal is to push through it. So, does anybody want to share what they noticed? Okay.
So what I noticed was I was looking at the trees out. Is it on? Yeah. Am I good? Okay. I was looking at the trees and I was just thinking about how in the winter we say everything is dead, right? And especially, I'm not going to get into it, but I've been going through some really hard times lately. And I've been thinking about that. And when I was looking at the trees, I remembered that they're not dead. They just don't have leaves right now. And that they don't need them. And that this is just a time for restoration. They grow. And then when it's time again, there will be leaves that come out. And all the leaves that they did drop, parts of them that they no longer needed, go back into the earth and create homes for things like fireflies and moths and caterpillars and all that good stuff. And it's all just a time for everything. And that none of it is dead, none of it is wasted. It just becomes something different.
Thank you for sharing. That's a great observation. One of the things that I do in my personal practice is I observe hermitage. Right now it's hermitage, because if the trees get to rest, why don't we? And there's something about just the nature of humans where when the weather's cold, we need to hibernate some so that we can do our best. So thank you for sharing that.
I was just thinking that this place really is a sanctuary, that it's just a feeling of peace and the quietness when everybody was being wherever they were, and that it was something I needed at the moment.
Yeah. And I appreciate everybody being so willing to try that out, because I know at first it's like, when is it going to be over? But to push through that and kind of sink in, that's one of the things in the rituals that I do anymore. We always have a sharing circle as part of it. And one of the most valuable things in the sharing circle is if you don't talk during your time, then nobody talks. So to have that time to just sink into it and to notice, wow, the sky is so blue today, or this really is a holy place. So I'm so glad that you got to have a moment of that. I didn't mean to make you do the running. I'd be willing to do it.
It's my job today.
Thank you for giving us that opportunity. I thought of two things. Actually, I love winter, and I see the bare trees as pencil drawings against a sky. And this morning, when I got up, the sun was up, and the pencil drawings against the sky were, I was looking out on the beautiful frost sparkling on the roofs outside my window. So I actually love winter. The second thing I thought of was touch. Yesterday at the MLK service, it closed with "We Shall Overcome," and everybody joined hands, and I suddenly realized I had on either side black hands and my white hands, and on the other side of the gentleman whose hand I was holding was a young man, white, who was not comfortable in being touched. So he gave his elbow to be touched. So it was a connection, even with when it's unusual in our community, and even with people who are uncomfortable with the simple act of touch. And he became comfortable with the elbow touch.
And what a kindness that the space was safe enough for him to connect in the way that he found appropriate. Yeah. Okay.
So I don't mean to put anybody on the spot here, but I'm sitting in the back. One thing I noticed is we're contemplating, it's like the design of everybody's sweaters in front of me. So each one has its own interesting little persona. Dawn's sweater over there reminds me of a really nicely well-organized spreadsheet. Dave's sweater reminds me of like jazz music that I just don't understand. It's really cool. There's a lot happening. I just don't get it though. Bonnie's sweater makes me think somebody that knew her and loved her made that for her. Lots of colors and just, vibrant. It was a gift. And I don't know, and Karen's sweater. It's like looking at the designs there and all these really intricate, interesting designs. And then as I was looking more, I started to realize some of those same designs on my sweater are also on Karen's sweater. Anyway, this was neat looking at all your sweaters.
What a beautiful point of connection, though. If nobody else wants to share, this is also a time for question and answers. I realize I came up here wearing a leather belt and an apron, so it's totally cool if you want to know more about that as well. Tell us about it. Okay, so I feel like I'm loud enough without the microphone. Can everyone understand me? Okay. All right, so I'm going to step over here so you can see me. One of the things that I believe in as a human and also as a practitioner is acts of service. So for me, the apron is part of my ritual wear because if you think, when people wear aprons, they're doing stuff, they're working. So the apron is the place to keep all my tools. The leather belt just looks really cool. Like that's, I look like a badass, right? This cloth right here, we decorated it at one of our rituals, and it's a piece that's going to change throughout. But if you think about in the kitchen, what do you use your rags for? You wipe your face, you wipe your hands. If somebody comes in, you might wipe tears. So this is a great way to help kind of keep yourself and your community clean. That's why that's on there. This serves double duty as a cup and a spoon because those are two sacred items. And a lot of people who consider themselves witches or magical practitioners are all about like wands and chalices and all these beautiful ornate things. And while I have nothing against that, I'm why we can't have nice things. And I tend to go more for the practical. So it's important to always have a cup. And, we talk about the metaphor of caring for others. You have to fill your cup before you can fill others. And then the broom is to help clear space or literally physically clear messes. So every single item, with the exception of my cool leather belts, every item has a purpose, and that purpose is devoted towards service. Because for me personally, my practice is very practical. My practice in that I actually practice it regularly. Making potlucks for rituals, feeding friends. I haven't actually gotten any stains on this yet, but it's going to be a bittersweet day when it happens. Normally, I also have a knife as well, but I felt like I didn't need to bring it. And then in my pocket, I have a tiny piece of coal. We're familiar with coal around here, right? So a lot of different religions have kind of like an underworld equivalent, right? And for us here in Appalachia, the coal mines, to me, are our underworld. And if you think about coal, it giveth and it taketh away. So carrying a little piece of coal with me is a reminder that, it's not very glamorous to look at, but it is so, so important. Coal is responsible for so many lives and for so many towns. But also, when we lose sight and reverence for what we have, things can go horribly wrong. That's when you can have mine collapses or, mountains can be stripped. So this is a reminder to me that we have our underworld, and it's given so much, but also balance is super important. So those are my pieces. And Chuck Taylor's just because I like them. So.
Thanks. I was going to say, if do you still do rituals, and are they open for other people to join?
They are, at this point, mostly private, but invite only, but get with me after this. They're in Johnson City, though, or Kingsport. Yeah.
What do you do at these rituals?
It varies. So probably the most open ritual that we do is called Harvest Home. Are you all familiar with corn dollies? Yeah, we make corn dollies every year. And the thought is that corn dollies are a form of sympathetic magic. And for those who aren't aware, sympathetic magic is like examples are voodoo dolls or wicker men. But you create the dolly. We do it with grasses because, we don't have a ton of corn husks lying around. But we do it with native grasses, and you put it up above the doorway. Over the course of the year, that dolly takes on all the negativity and keeps your home safe. So for Harvest Home every year, you take down your old dolls, you build your new dolls, and the old dolls get sent off in a fire and thanked for their work in the year. So what we do varies. We also have another ritual in the spring where we created seed bombs with native seeds. So that way you could drop them anywhere and you would be able to help local pollinators. So what we do varies depending on the year. We try to live seasonally, and for people who are thinking, oh, that sounds kind of Wiccan, their seasons aren't really our seasons. So we're still very much figuring it out, but we want to create a practice that feels right here and that kind of blends the old ways, the ways of the people who initially moved here. I mean, the Appalachian people are varied and strong and stubborn and proud, and we want to be true to that, but also very much acknowledge that we live in the era of spreadsheets and Facebook and Twitter, and to kind of bridge that gap in a way that feels sustainable.
If you don't identify as Wiccan, do you have a label for your practice?
I personally identify as a bioregional animist. Yeah, I get that reaction a lot. I like to distill it down to the witch and the scientist. So, a bioregion is scientific. That's where the scientist comes in. It's a scientifically defined region based on the flora and fauna. We have the privilege of living in the Appalachian Mountain Range, which is one of the most biodiverse regions in the world. Now, the Amazon has us beat, but also they had a head start. So, but animism is the belief that animals and plants and inanimate objects can have their own spirit and soul. So it's not just a spirit of place, it's a spirit of this place right here. So it's trying to build a relationship with the different plants and the different waters and the different animals. So it very much is trying to be intentional with the land and seeing if it speaks to you. It's trying to be a good steward. Yeah. Kind of, but I don't feel comfortable using that term because it's not one that my culture has, but kind of, yeah.
So thank you for your talk. You said it's on invitation only, or what does it mean, and who's the we you're talking about?
Oh, so my sister and I practice. All right, so for those of you playing along at home, when I was here, 5 or 6 years ago, at that time, I was a part of a coven. There were 15 of us. But it got to the point where it was no longer sustainable. So my sister and I are forming a dyad, and we're trying to figure out how to kind of decolonize witchcraft in a very small way. And we still have so much to learn and so much to unlearn. So I don't want to come up here and sound like I'm the expert. I believe that personal, I believe that spirituality, like a lot of other things in life, should be experiential. And so what I practice is what I found that works for me, and we're still very much figuring it out.
Jen, thanks so much for coming and speaking again today.
Thanks for having me.
I just wanted to share with you all that Jen will always hold a special place in our hearts. This is, so during the COVID year, which is probably not all good memories for teachers, it was a very difficult time where they had to teach online. Little Rosalie was in 3rd grade. And none of my kids were fortunate enough to have Jen, a.k.a. Miss Frizzle, as a teacher prior to this. And I am not one to make requests of principals. And I did it in this case. I called the principal and I said, I think Rosalie would really benefit from having Miss Heglar as her teacher.
I didn't plan on crying today, so thanks for that, Emily.
When you were talking about the magic of the mundane, what that brought back to me was that memory of that hard year and hearing your voice over the Zoom in the background, trying to bring excitement and dealing with this incredibly difficult time. And I think about how just so much it brings to mind, like how the kids have changed from that experience. And yeah, you'll just always be very dear to us. So thank you.
Leaving the classroom broke my heart. It really did. But I am so fortunate that in my internship, I'm a counseling intern, I get to work with children and adolescents now. And I loved teaching because I got to know kids as people, as who they are. But it got to the point where it felt like getting to know them as people was almost a liability. So I had to teach to get to counseling, but I was so excited to see Rosalie today. Like, I slow played it poorly. It's true. This is my partner, Dallas. He knows I'm like, oh, Rosalie might be there. And I saw Zen, but I don't know if Zen saw me. So, thank you for that.
On a slightly related note, I just want to give a shout out for Shouty Thursday.
Oh, yeah!
Another service you provided during the pandemic.
But that's another one of the things. So during the pandemic, every Thursday on my Facebook, I would just, the rule is it has to be all caps, and it could be good and it could be bad. But see, that's what I talk about when I mean magic. And was it chocolates that you brought me once? Eclairs, yes. And I was like, well, if that's what I get for Shouty Thursdays, I'm going to keep that going. But yeah, little things like that. When we talk about behaviors, our actions rippling out, it's things like that is what life's all about. So I should have known I was going to cry. That's what I get for wearing mascara today. All right. Thank you all for your time.